rejoining us from our study session on electrification. Some of you may be just joining our meeting, so apologize for the delay in tonight's meeting. We had a very robust conversation with a lot of public input, so apologies for going over time. Thanks for your patience tonight. We can, let's see, once again, we'll, Victor, if you can give us a quick introduction for those who may be joining now for this meeting regarding our Spanish language translation option for the City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Muy buenas noches. Gracias por reunirse a otra junta del Consejo Municipal de la ciudad de Half Moon Bay. Le queremos dejar saber que esta reunión será interpretada en el español. Para poder acceder a lo que es el canal de audio, usted tendrá que hacer clic en el botón de interpretación, que será un icono de un globo o un mundo en su barra de tareas de esta plataforma de Zoom. Después va a aparecer un menú y de ahí entonces usted podrá seleccionar el idioma. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Appreciate it. Okay. Can we please have a roll call?
Councilmember Rohrbach.
Sorry, here.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Here.
Councilmember Penrose.
Here.
Vice Mayor Reddick.
Here.
Mayor Brownstone.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, we will begin our meeting with a public forum. And the way the public forum works is to comment on anything that isn't agendized for this evening. It is also an option to comment on a consent item. So again, comment for anything that isn't on our regular agenda, which are all the items that start with ordinance and resolutions items, sections 2 and 3 of our agenda. And there can be a comment on a consent item during public forum. So we're now officially opening up public forum. Everyone will have 2 minutes each to speak. The way to participate in the public forum is to click on participants and find your name in the attendees list. And you'll see there's an option with a raised hand. Click on the raised hand and we will then call on folks in order. So anyone interested right now in making a comment during public forum, please raise your hand. So there's one. Any others? Okay, let's start.
Mark Pizzolatto, you have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let's see. I'm actually here to talk about the STR consent item. And I just wanted to, I sent the council an email earlier today and Joe Butcher that same subject of email last week. And I'll just bring up the first item in the list because I can't cover all of it in 2 minutes. So in any case, after the whole discussion about the big items relating to the short-term rentals, I started reading through the rest of the ordinance, and I come across what might could be considered fine print that talks about the logistical process of getting started and converting the existing operators to operators under the new ordinance rules. And in that situation, I'm trying to figure out, like, according to what's described, once the California Coastal Commission actually approves the ordinance as is, then it comes into effect. And at that point, we have been operating all along. We've got reservations reaching into the future. We have a 5-bedroom place that can easily accommodate 12 people, and yet the ordinance is going to restrict that. So what I'm trying to figure out is, well, the instant that the ordinance comes into effect, suddenly we have 6 months to apply to become a permanent or recognized operator. But we have reservations reaching into the future because nobody reserves our 12-person property near in because they got to coordinate 12 people and get them on board with when they can do it. So those most of our reservations are 3 or 4 months out. So I'm trying to figure out do I have existing reservations that can be fulfilled, ones that have been made prior to the ordinance being approved, or am I suddenly going to be in violation and be subject to having my whole operation canceled? That's all.
Yeah. Time's up, and I think we did receive your comments in email, and staff can, we may have a response to that when we resume. I don't see any other hands up, right? Okay.
No.
Public forum is now officially closed, and we have a couple of proclamations and presentations to make tonight. Our first presentation is from Midcoast Community Council update, and I believe Claire Toutant is with us. Thank you, Claire, and we'd love to hear from you.
Good evening. I'll just let you know really quickly what we'll be dealing with at our meeting tomorrow night, and if anybody wants to tune in and join us. First thing is we're going to be supporting a grant that the county is applying for working for safety and traffic improvements in the Moss Beach corridor of Highway 1. Then there'll be a item on El Granada wildfire preparedness presented by the County Parks Department and the County Public Works Department jointly. Then there's a presentation of a community member has been collecting signatures regarding fire safety in Corey Park, and he will present that petition to us in the hopes that we will pass it on to the county. Then our website, as I think I've mentioned before, has been running on borrowed time. It's been in a very antiquated format, and we think we've gotten it updated. It was easier than we thought, thanks partly to Lisa Ketchum, and that will be presented. It's been optimized and made much more user-friendly for mobile phones and other such things, and not just laptops. And the RCD, ever optimistic, is starting to set up volunteers for the First Flush program, which is where they measure the pollutants in the creeks after the first heavy rain. And that's supposed to be what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So feel free to join.
Great. Thank you so much for that update, Claire. Greatly appreciate it, as always. Next, Matthew, I believe you're going to do a presentation regarding a donation from Friends of Half Moon Bay Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. It's wonderful to be in front of you tonight with this item. I'm not going to share much. With us is Maria Burns. She is the administrator for the Friends of Half Moon Bay Parks and Rec, which is a nonprofit that helps support parks and recreation activities here on the coast side through fundraising and other activities. And they have done some great work for us recently and have some money for us, which is always our favorite kind of item. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Maria. She's going to share a short presentation on the Frenchman's Creek Playground and then present us with the check. Maria.
Good evening, everyone. First, thank you so much to all the members of council for having us this evening. We're very excited to be able to present this at this point. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go from there. Okay, so as many of you know, as you all know, I should say, earlier in 2020,
Maria, I'm sorry. I'm only seeing a
Yes.
black screen, and I'm not sure if that's what
Yeah.
everyone else is seeing. Yeah.
Oh,
That's what we have up. Thanks.
can you see anything now?
Not yet.
Let's do this, Maria. Why don't you unshare? I've got your
Okay.
presentation up and I'll share.
Perfect.
And you just tell me when to advance.
All right.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank
Can
you.
everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. So as I was saying, and Matthew, you can go to the next slide if you don't mind. In early 2020, our board president was actually at a Park and Rec Commission meeting, and she learned about and heard about the project and challenges as things were moving forward over those few months. And she got excited and brought the idea of us as a board to fundraise for this project. So she brought it in, we all discussed it, everyone got excited, and we decided to move forward with raising the funds needed. You can go to the next slide, Matthew. So we worked with our fantastic partners in the city, especially Deputy City Manager Matthew and Eddie, also from Park and Recreation. They were amazing. We really had a great time working with them. And we created a flyer, as you can see right here. We did this postcard with the city. They mailed it for us to everybody in Frenchman's Creek, and we got everybody excited about it. We actually had a number of them. So we had some kids in the neighborhood go and distribute, in full masks, also some of the postcards later on as a second push. So it was great. Public Works hung banners for us. We solicited donors. Thank you, Councilmember Penrose, for your help with soliciting a specific donor. We secured many gifts through mailing, email solicitations, personal solicitations, and phone calls. And we did a really big push through Curbside Gives this year as well. Matthew, do you mind going to the next slide? Thank you. These are our top donors. We just wanted to take a moment to say thank you again to them. Our top donor was the Nearhan family. Our next donor down was the Colosi family. Our bronze level donors were Sharzad and Paul Pantera and Republic Services. And then we had a number of donors at $1,000. Matt Arnold, who lives in the community, Eric Harger, Mavericks Community Foundation, New Leaf Community Markets, and Jess Sloan. So all of these people were amazing. And again, we just want to say thank you to them and to all of our community, because there were many smaller gifts as well. We also collected all of this data. So we've got all these new donors, collected all this data through a brand new database that we've been working on throughout the year. So it was a great test for the next step for Friends as well to keep growing. We had a new NetSuite database that was donated by Oracle. And so we were able to record everything too. We did a ribbon cutting with the city and we reopened on June 8th. Matthew, do you mind moving to the next slide for me, please? Thank you. With the city, it was wonderful. John Doherty was there. He spoke from Public Works. Vice Mayor Rudek spoke. We had a great turnout. The whole community came out. Kids were all there. My kids, the little guy in the red there is my child. Actually, while I spoke, my son came up and interrupted the whole thing. It was very funny. Now we're working with a scout on their Eagle project to create a permanent donor wall. We're very excited about how this went, our great new partnerships, and future projects as well. So now I'm very honored, Matthew, if you don't mind going to the last slide, to present a check for $25,000 to us, to all of you. And thank you again for everybody and all of their support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you to all the donors. Thank you, Councilmember Penrose, for assisting in that effort. And really, it was a really nice community effort and money spent for such a great cause. And that's greatly appreciated. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And
Yes.
I can't resist making the plug that this was a great partnership that's been established leading up to what's going to be next, which is fundraising to finalize the funding we need for Carter Park, which folks know we're actively working on and the state is providing some wonderful funding for. So if you want to see more projects like this, please donate to the Half Moon Bay Parks and Rec, Friends of Half Moon Bay Parks and Rec for Carter Park, and let's get that thing built. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see. Next is Mayor's announcements. I'm gonna reserve that. No announcements right now. Catherine, I don't believe there's any report out for any recent closed sessions, correct?
Correct. No report out, no recent closed sessions.
Great. Then let's see, we'll move on to city matter updates to council. And our first update will be on coastal cleanup day. And will that be Matthew or Jennifer this evening? I wasn't sure.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I believe it's Veronica, believe it or not.
Okay.
She's removing her electrification ordinance hat and she's putting on her beach cleanup hat.
Great, fantastic. Welcome back, Veronica.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, I know you've seen a lot of me today, so my update is quick. But why can't, there we go. But this past Saturday was Coastal Cleanup Day. So we had 3 events here on the coast, one at Dunes Beach, which was led by the Rotary Club, one at Roosevelt Beach, which was led by Sea Hugger, and one at Poplar Beach led by Surf Rider. And then we did have a little employee cleanup on the Friday before, so I have a little picture of the city staff on here as well. So it was a really great event. Overall, there was over 250 volunteers and they picked up over 300 pounds of trash on Saturday. So I just want to give a big thank you to all of the nonprofits that volunteered as site captains and all of the participants for going out there on Coastal Cleanup Day and cleaning all of the litter from our beaches. So just a big thank you to everybody. And I believe there's one other update here from Jessica.
Cheers to the coastal cleanup. Thank you, everybody. Fantastic.
Thanks, Veronica. I wanted to provide an update on remote meetings and some legislation surrounding that. So since last April, we have been conducting remote meetings under governor's executive orders. Those are set to expire on September 30th. Legislation was introduced this year, was passed by the legislature last week, and was also signed by the governor, AB 361, that would continue to allow for jurisdictions to meet remotely during states of emergency. And so this would apply to any state of emergency in the future, be it a fire, PSPS events, anything that the city council declared a state of emergency for, would allow us to meet remotely during that state of emergency. It sunsets in 2024, and so during the 2023 session, it will be reevaluated. It does require jurisdictions to adopt a resolution of necessity every 30 days. And so at our October 5th meeting, we will have that resolution on the consent calendar. And then that allows for the city council to reevaluate every 30 days, whether there is still a need to conduct remote meetings or whether we move to in-person and hybrid meetings. The city clerks of San Mateo County have been discussing all of these changes over the last few weeks, and a majority of cities in San Mateo County are planning to use AB 361 to continue holding remote meetings, at least for the foreseeable future. So our October 5th meeting will also be on Zoom, and we will have that resolution of necessity on the agenda for council's approval.
Great. Thanks for letting us know what to expect on that, Jessica. Greatly appreciated. Okay, we're now going to move on to consent calendar. Does anyone have anything to pull? Consent calendar? No. I'll make a motion that we adopt the consent calendar. Items 1A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances, except item 1B, accept the warrants list for the month of August 2021. Item 1C, approval of meeting minutes for all the meetings listed. Item 1D, waive the second reading regarding short-term rentals, waive the second reading and adopt an ordinance amending portions of Chapter 18, zoning, and Chapter 3, revenue and finance of the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code to establish short-term rental regulations and update the home occupation regulations. Item 1E, adopt a resolution accepting donations from the Friends of Half Moon Bay Park and Recreations in the amount of $25,000 to appropriate these funds in the Parks and Development Fund. Item 1F, award the construction contract for the Sheriff's Substation renovation project. Let's see yep, that's it. Item 1F, short list.
Second.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Penrose,
Aye.
Councilmember Jimenez,
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reddick,
Yes.
Mayor Brownstone,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. We have no ordinances and public hearings tonight. So we'll now move on to item 3A under resolutions and staff reports. Item 3A, it's regarding the 2021 Measure D allocations transfer. And I believe we will have a staff report first.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and share my screen. We have a quick PowerPoint for you tonight.
Well, while Brittany sets up, good evening, Mayor, Brownstown Council. Brittany and I have a two-part presentation. She's going to take the first part, presenting the Measure D transfers to you, and then I will cover a few items in a study session format to get your input on Measure D regulation updates that we would like you to consider.
Okay.
You're just about there, Brittany. There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. So, good evening, everyone. This is the item on the 2021 Measure D allocation transfers. Just to give a brief overview of why we are here tonight. Measure D is the city's annual growth population limitation. It was adopted by the voters in 1999 to replace Measure A, which was our previous annual growth limitation, limiting our population growth to 3%. And Measure D replaced that with a 1% growth limitation, divided into a 0.5% for a defined outside of downtown area, and 5% for a downtown, with an additional bonus of a 0.5% for downtown. So it is more of a 1.5% growth limitation. So each year in December, City Council confirms how many allocations will be available for the upcoming calendar year using census data on population and persons per households, and the amount of new building permits issued in the previous year. And that number is then available for applications during our January application window every calendar year. And then each September, City Council has the discretion to transfer any unused downtown base allocations for projects outside of the downtown. And that is why we are here tonight. So the January ranking process is guided by scoring criteria. However, the September transfer process does not rely on that scoring criteria. It does rely on a resolution adopted by City Council in 2019 that emphasizes housing affordability and project readiness. So the map on the left here is the Measure D downtown area, which represents the city's former redevelopment area. And this was part of the ballot measure. So this is the map that we are used. It's also incorporated into the city's Measure D ordinance, which lives in our subdivision code. So you can see that it doesn't quite match up with our new town center, which is part of the city's recently certified and updated land use plan, where City Council really prioritizes new development in this town center boundary. And there is some overlap, but you can see where the town center picks up this significant R2 neighborhood where there is density for duplexes, as well as this single family residential neighborhood east of Main Street. So the land use plan provides us with something of a new foundation moving forward, although we do need to rely on the downtown boundary provided by the Measure D ballot. So this is a brief summary of the allocation numbers for 2021. There were a total of 66 confirmed last December, with 22 available for the outside of downtown, 22 downtown base units, and then an additional 22 downtown bonus units. So all of the outside downtown 22 allocations were awarded during the January application process, and 2 of the downtown base units have been awarded. So this means that 20 are remaining for the September transfer process that we are here for tonight. So we do have 20 available, and we received 27 applications. Sorry, I think I skipped a slide. There we go. So this is a high-level summary of the allocations that were requested, organized by the type of project, multifamily, single family with ADUs, which is a total of 2 allocations, ADUs with an existing primary residence, and junior ADUs or JDUs. So we did have a total of 27 requests, as I mentioned. The breakdown of the 20 that are available for transfers and the 20 that are recommended by staff for the transfers are shown in the right-hand column here. We would note that 4 of the units included in the 6 single family with ADU applications are proposed to be deed restricted affordable. This is a more detailed breakdown of the applications that are proposed, recommended for approval, as well as those that are not tonight. And the main idea here, we really wanted to emphasize the different categories that these applications fell into. So they are all outside of the Measure D downtown, but we did want to highlight how this compared to the town center. So the top category in blue here shows the applications that are within the town center. So they're picked up in that R2 neighborhood or the single family east of Main Street in our town center. And these projects include a mix of multifamily units, ADUs, and single family with ADUs. So you can see Poplar and Fourth on the right-hand column here did not demonstrate readiness, but we would expect it to score well in the January ranking process. And then we have our outside of town center in the green and the yellow on the bottom 2 columns. So the outside town center ADUs are the 6 listed here. And then we do have a single family and ADU project outside of town center recommended for approval that demonstrate project readiness with a full set of plans, and the others that we do encourage to reapply in January with a full set of plans. So just to summarize the column in the middle, recommended for approval, this does total those 20 available allocations that are recommended for transfer tonight. They include 12 town center units and 15 ADUs total. This map was included as an attachment in your staff report, just a visual depiction of how the town center aligns with the Measure D downtown boundary, the Measure D downtown in the blue and the town center in the yellow. And then you can see the applications that are recommended for transfer tonight in the blue dots, and recommended to return in January in the red. And we wanted to highlight the housing element for you briefly. So all of these allocations are becoming increasingly significant for meeting our RHNA numbers. We are currently in cycle 5 with a RHNA obligation of building 240 units. This is doubling to 480 units in the upcoming cycle 6 for our housing element update that will be implemented in 2023. And HCD has given some guidance that we can count ADUs towards our RHNA numbers when we're trying to, when we're going through the process of figuring out how we can accommodate these 480 units over 8 years throughout the city. So we can count ADUs based on our recent ADU production. For Half Moon Bay, this has been about 10 units per year in recent years, totaling 80 units over that 8-year cycle that can be counted against our RHNA. But Measure D is a really good indicator of how those numbers are higher. It basically shows our projects that are in the hopper. So we have the, I believe it was 20 ADUs that we have already approved through Measure D this year. We have the 15 that are recommended for transfer tonight. And this would really increase the amount of ADUs that we can count towards our RHNA going forward. We will be coming back to this motion. This is a bit of a 2-part presentation tonight. We are considering an action item for the Measure D transfers, as well as doing a bit of a study session on potential Measure D ordinance updates. And Jill Ekus will be presenting on that, and then we will come back to the motion. Jill?
Thank you, Brittany. Perfect, thank you. So in your staff report for this item, Council, we presented 2 different ways of approaching an update to the Measure D ordinance to improve alignment of the ranking system and hopefully the allocation process with City Council priorities, as well as our land use plan update and our forthcoming housing element. A simplification of the ranking system is proposed to focus on these categories, which do overlap somewhat with the categories currently included in the ranking system, but we're proposing to really make this quite a bit more straightforward using that town center construct as a priority for where council is interested in focusing development, as well as a lot higher number of points awarded for affordability relative to our regional housing needs allocation or RHNA, as Brittany was previously discussing. Accessibility in a much bolder way than is addressed in the ordinance now. We didn't know where the electrification ordinance might be going, so we really thought that could be, if it's required of all new development to comply with that, we thought the sustainability measures would really be able to dig into water conservation, which is so critical on the coast. Of course, LCLUP consistency, that's the local coastal land use plan, as well as the zoning code related to that. And then readiness. We talked a lot about readiness tonight because that came from council's resolution a couple of years ago. And we noted that when projects aren't ready, sometimes these allocations expire, and really it can be very frustrating for other applicants who might have been able to move forward. And we just hope to take advantage of the capacity that's provided, especially for town center units, affordable units, etc. Next slide, please. We prepared, and we don't expect people to dive into this, but if people are interested in just trying on for size, how these categories might result in different scores for different types of combinations of units that's provided in the staff report. Next slide, please. Zooming into tiering, we're hoping to get your feedback tonight regarding the ranking system relative to these different categories and tiers as presented here, where affordable housing would be awarded more points really than any other type of unit, and as well as town center. Through the mayor, I see a hand up with Vice Mayor Reddick.
Yeah, could you just define for me accessibility? What is meant there?
Sure. I think there's some feedback. Okay, is that better? All right. A fully accessible unit would be one that can be accessed and enjoyed by someone who has any type of disability. Can be an accessibility disability or low vision or hearing loss or other kinds of needs. So it's a wide range of things that can be accommodated with an accessible unit. When we talk about visitability, we also are really interested in units where our friends and family members can come and see us if we have the ability to invite them in, if we have a flush entry or some other provisions that make it accessible. Accessibility is actually considered to be a sustainability measure because it allows housing to age along with us as we get older or as our families change or household composition changes and needs change. So it's a really important part of design to build accessibility or visibility into early design. It's much easier with new units than it is to retrofit, similar to your discussion earlier this evening. And we would encourage council to think about how this fits into a ranking system. I hope that helped. We also noted in the current ranking system, the point counts they're really tight. There's just a few points awarded for each category, and it's very detailed. It's really thoughtful. But what happens is we could get all of our applications, and now that we've used it a few times, they may all score with in just a few points of each other, or we end up with some really close ones, really tight ties. So we've been thinking about what tiebreakers would mean for updating the ranking system, and think that would be really, really helpful, especially if we had a kind of a tiering for the tiebreakers in addition to the scoring. So we've been testing corner cases with the concept that was provided to you in the staff report. We'll do more work with this as we get your input tonight. Moving on to the next slide. In addition to the ranking system is the actual requirements around allocation. Allocation requirements are more defined by the ballot measure than the ranking system. There's a lot of flexibility in the ranking system. The ballot measures, we really are kind of locked into it. But that said, we see some flexibility there because this is a growth control measure and for population and not about specifically the number of units. So there's been a number of ideas that have come through discussions that we've had about housing, public meetings that have taken place with the Planning Commission as well as with this council. For example, when we've looked at Measure D transfers in the past, we know that we have some applicants who have wanted us to do some research on some of these things. So we're bringing some ideas forward in the staff report as well as tonight to also see if you're interested in having any of these be pursued. So for example, partial allocations. it's clear that persons per household is lower for different kinds of units, such as accessory dwelling unit, excuse me, accessory dwelling units. And so there's a bit of a write-up in your staff report about what that might look like if there was a way to have partial allocations. Also note the current Measure D allows for phasing for subdivisions, but it really doesn't acknowledge larger rental development and projects that don't need a subdivision. We know that council's really interested in affordable housing project, for example, one with apartments with maybe 20 or 30 units, for example, and we might not have that many allocations available in a single year. So we would like to work on expanding phasing to support projects like that. Transfers and banking are additional ideas about trying to make the most of the allocations that council has, in particular for affordable housing. One of the ideas about these transfers, not the transfer item before you tonight regarding council's discretion to transfer downtown allocations to outside of downtown, but this is more an applicant who is awarded an allocation and realizes they're not going to be able to use it in that year and might be able to turn it back into the system so that it might be available, for example, at the September transfer time. That should fall within the limits of Measure D. Banking is, I have to say, it's my favorite idea that we've had. We're not sure how far we can go with it, but that concept for banking, and I just want to be clear with everybody in the room, including our audience, Measure D allocations don't roll over. If there are unused allocations in a year, they don't roll over into the next year. And what we're looking at here is if we could bank some of them to the city for affordable housing that is related to the city's housing element and the regional housing needs allocation, and or in the town center, or some combination of those criteria, so that we are the holders of them and we could then convey them to the developers of affordable housing. And I think there's a thread in there that we could put together if you would like us to pursue that. This is probably the most complex thing that we're proposing to work on with this. Next slide, please. Brittany mentioned the September transfer process, and we're so glad council passed the resolution a couple of years ago, which does help. But we would like some more help with doing this. We did establish a timeline this year and tried to make that really well known. It was published on the website, but it is not in the ordinance. We tried to help our applicants be really ready for this process and have their plans prepared. It's just something that we could use some detail and some support for that. And then what we charge for this. We spend a lot of time with the ADU applications, and we're proposing the way that ADUs are sort of scaled to single family homes, that perhaps a 50% charge to a Measure D would be appropriate. Currently, we're not charging for them. We did not know in 2018 that the 2020 state law was going to even further generate activity with ADUs. But we'd also encourage waiving the fees for any affordable units or workforce housing overlay units as established in the land use plan update, insofar as all these units would be affordable to low, very low, and extremely low income households. And that is fairly consistent with actually current housing element policy, even to be supportive in that way. Next slide. So we can come back to this chart while you're discussing this. We're going to be asking you when we're just about done presenting here to review the transfers and to also give us some input on the items that I just covered. The ranking system, those were the first, that was the first set of items on the left column. And of course, there's always the what else, what did we miss? And the allocation requirements and anything else that you would like us to consider if you would like to pursue updating the Measure D allocation ranking system and requirements. And I, through the mayor, I see Vice Mayor Reddick has her hand up.
I'm not prepared to discuss Measure A ordinance updates tonight. I think that's, yeah, that should be a study session, but not attached to this item tonight. This was a voter, this was a citizen initiative approved by the voters. And, you know, I think we need to give it the attention it deserves. So I would say as a separate item at a different meeting, but not lumped together with other things tonight. I support the transfers for tonight. I don't have any issue with that. As for the ranking criteria, we just discussed, you know, reach code tonight. I'd like to add, you know, energy conservation or energy efficiency in design and materials as a criteria that ought to be applied when we're deciding between projects.
So just, Councilmember, just to clarify, you do support moving forward on the transfers, but not these other items in terms of we're talking about ranking, banking, et cetera, all those other issues. Great.
Well, the ranking criteria, we're talking
Ranking
about
criteria.
accessibility and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Those are good. I'd like to add, you know, energy efficiency.
And energy efficiency.
And
Got it.
materials. Because I think when we look at our zoning implementation, I'd like to see us, you know, tackle energy efficiency in the form of ordinances around, you know, design, construction, that sort of thing, not just operation of the built environment. So if we could add something relating to energy efficiency. But I think this Measure D ordinance updates ought to be a separate item in a different meeting.
Got it. So we're going to stay focused on also clarification questions now before we open it up for public comment. So I'll go over to Councilmember Penrose.
Through the mayor, we
yes.
want to just click to your end slide here. Just depending on the direction you give us, we will make sure that council has all the time that it needs with this item for whatever ordinance update would be going forward in advance of bringing something to the Planning Commission. We want your policy direction first, but any update would require Planning Commission review. It's part of the local coastal program and part of the subdivision ordinance, and the commission does review that before and make recommendations to you. They are not an approving body. They would make a recommendation to council. And then of course, any updates would then, considering what council adopts, would move on to the coastal commission. Brittany, though, I think we have the last slide returns us to the recommendation regarding transfers. And we'll go ahead and take the presentation down now. Happy to answer clarifying questions. And we do expect some members of the public to also have comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Penrose, you had a question, I think.
I have no clarifying questions.
Okay.
I will have comments.
Great. I did have one clarifying question. Of the 4 ADUs, and I think there was an asterisk, there were 4 ADUs, and there's an asterisk said that they were affordable, correct? Of the ADU units in one of the slides there, I saw, correct? That were included. No, that's okay. I'm just wondering, of those 4, how many were classified as very low income, low income? Well, what were the 3? Very low income?
Extremely
low income. Thank you, Councilor Penrose. Extremely low income, very low income, and low income. And then affordable, I think, was the 4th category of whatever that include. So was there a breakdown of that or?
Yes, so it is preliminary, of course, depending on if they are able to move forward with Measure D tonight. It was actually for a combination of a single family with an ADU. So two kind of sets of those totaling 4 allocations, 2 single families, 2 ADUs, all preliminarily proposed at a low affordability rate.
Okay, great. Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, so we'll open up for, assuming there's no other clarifying questions, we'll open up for public comment, please. I see we have 2 hands raised. If you have public comment, please click on your name and click on the hand symbol if you'd like to make public comment right now. And let's start. We will have 2-minute timer.
Judy Taylor, go ahead.
Hi there, thanks. Well, I basically support the transfer of the applications and the idea of a workshop to deal with reworking Measure D. I just want to plant the seed at this point. Back in the very early days of Measure A, you could make an offer on a lot and submit an application and you would be considered, you know, the applicant. And within a year or 2, that was done away with. So now you have to buy the lot, you have to own the lot before you can apply for the Measure D. And in the real world, that already makes it harder for people of limited means to get their foot in the door. Then when you start talking about readiness, in order to get to readiness, you have a survey that's going to be a minimum of $3,000. You're going to generally have to have a soils report that is $6,000 to $7,000. You're going to have plans drawn that can be anywhere from a couple grand to 20 grand. And that's all going to be done with the roll of the dice. So I just want you to understand that when you get down into the weeds, you're raising the bar that much further, that much higher for those people who are really trying to get their foot in the door. And that's been my passion. I've helped a number of people get into their first homes. You know, they buy the lot, we get some seller financing, they get a manufactured home. And, you know, it's been a way that a number of people that I know have been able to get their foot in the housing door. So I just really want you to be aware of what the unintended consequences are when you require those plans to be done before you even know if you're going to be able to build. I would suggest maybe having a short expiration if they don't have the plans. So maybe 60 days to come in with something. Maybe that could be something that would be workable.
Thanks for your comments, Judy. Appreciate it. Next speaker, please.
Tim Pond.
Tim Pond, and I actually design accessory dwelling units, and I support this transfer. First of all, the energy requirements in place by the state are very significant, and these are all extremely efficient the way that they're built. The Title 24 is, you know, extremely resilient in covering all aspects of energy efficiency. And I want to just speak to the carbon. And I think I'm really in favor of redrawing the downtown map. It's a ridiculous looking map. If you look at it, it goes out to Farmer John's pumpkin fields and out to the sewer plant and then up by the high school in these open fields. Makes no sense that part of downtown is not included in the downtown map. And then these, in terms of the number of people occupying these, I've built 10 in town probably here in the last couple of years and got permits in process for 4 or 5 more. Most of these are for family members. Some are for rentals, but some are for overcrowded. A lot of these are for overcrowded houses because the single family model of housing does not fit the demographic of our society, and it's not going to sustain itself. We have to have multi-generational housing, and we have to get on board with this. The single family house is probably one of the worst ideas that ever came about. And this is why the state government has taken steps to abolish it. The last thing I'd like to say is that the carbon loading from building these units is probably a quarter of what you get from a new house, maybe less. your infrastructure is already in place. You're using existing connections. Your production, your site is already prepared. The city works really well with allowing us to limit the disturbance and use means and methods to construct something that's very light on the environment. So if you talk about reduction of carbon loading, this is the model we have to do: infill and heavy infill, and increase our population density where we have the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. Appreciate your comments.
No other speakers, Mayor.
Now officially closed public comment segment. And we are now open for council discussion. Councilmember Rohrbach.
Originally, the council had made a big deal about its priority for increasing density in the downtown. And I was fully on board with that. And last year, when we were presented with this transfer of Measure D certificates from the downtown to outside, I voted against it and explained why. And my objections still continue. I really think that it's important that we support densification of the downtown area and not sprawl. And so I will continue to vote against this transfer. I've been very clear about where I'm coming from. I'm sorry that these people who have applied for them may not get it, but it's not because I didn't warn that I'm opposed to this kind of transfer.
Thank you, Councilmember Rohrbach. Councilmember Jimenez.
Well, I don't support the transfer. In my reasons are affordable housing for low income, extreme low income, and very, very, very low income. As you know, the city of Half Moon Bay has been out of compliance for low income housing. Affordable housing, it means a different thing. As we talked about, the 1% growth of Half Moon Bay, holding these allocations in the outside corridor of a downtown area, I'm not interested. If it's not about to provide housing for community, multifamily, housing, apartment buildings, I would like to maybe review it, maybe revise it after we have our special meeting in November. As you know, November was we're very looking forward to it. We're going to be talking about, building low-income housing and affordable housing for a community that is in great need. So I'm gonna say no, I do not support the transfers, and until Half Moon Bay, provides housing for a community. Thank you.
Councilmember Jimenez. Councilmember Penrose.
Yes, I am also not in favor of transfer tonight, with the exception, with a caveat, that if it were deed restricted to affordable low-income housing, I would be in favor of it. I also am very strongly in favor of the idea of the city being the banker for unused downtown Measure D units. So I would like to see us allow people to build outside of the downtown, as long as we're talking about affordable units. I have no interest in giving out these very precious Measure D allocations, which could be banked for further use or could be phased in for larger projects on market rate housing outside of the downtown.
Councilmember Penrose. So I just want to summarize what I think I've heard so far. There were 4 units, including single-family residence plus an ADU. 4 units of a combination of single-family residence and ADUs for very low-income housing. Okay, so my question 1 is, might there be some consensus for those who are against any of the transfers to allow those 4 transfers for low-income affordable housing? That leaves 16 units. I'm just asking. My next question is, can we decide tonight that, yes, we would, because this whole use or lose them thing is concerning me. With those other 16 units, can we bank them? Can we agree to bank those for affordable housing? Or that's really, or we don't have a process in place yet to do that, is what I'm understanding. And that's too bad. So we're willing to lose the 16, maybe go forward with those 4, because there's no way to bank them. Can staff just enlighten me if I've got that all right?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Brownstone and council members. Brittany and I would like to reshare a slide because I think it will, we intended for it to be ready for this exact moment of your deliberation. Brittany, I was thinking of the one with the different colors on it. I think it's a little easier for me. We can go to that one if you want. Perfect, thank you. So yes, the banking concept is a future looking thing. The ordinance does not allow for that. I was presenting that as something that we would like to research for you when we think there's some promise. We can't guarantee that it will work, but we do think there's some promise there. So holding back on a transfer isn't going to affect banking right now or phasing or anything really, because the ordinance doesn't accommodate that. So we would just want to be clear about that. This chart was meant to help understand the staff recommendation a little bit better about the tiering. And we certainly remember Council Member Roderick's statement last year. We hear the consistency. We do want to be clear though about the blue tier. This blue tier, these are all units that are proposed within the town center. The town center is that area that Brittany presented at the very beginning, which is acknowledged in the land use plan update as really our new version of downtown. So we just wanted to be clear that there are 12 units proposed within that defined downtown boundary. And just because they're outside of the old redevelopment area, they are still in the town center. A lot of them are in that R2 district. So we're hoping that at a minimum, the affordable, those that are proposed to be affordable would be transferred. Brittany can give you the details on that again. They were applied to be for low income households, and the applicants committed in writing to have deed restrictions, which means we will have affordable housing agreements with these property owners for units that are in the town center. All of those affordable units would be located in that town center area. The next tier that we had hoped you would consider would be the 12 that are in town center, which includes those 4 affordable units. Outside of town center, there were an additional 6 ADUs with no single family home involved at all. And as you saw, approving and keeping the ADUs moving could be very helpful to our housing needs allocation requirements with our housing element. And so we are concerned about holding those back. We understand council's deliberation and that this is discretionary for you. And we've told all of the applicants that. That said, if you were to consider the blue layer, then we'd be happy to talk to you about the green layer. And then just so you know, that last one was an applicant in July, or excuse me, January, that missed the cut back in January and has fully developed plans. So it's challenging. We understand that, and we know we didn't bring you an easy item. We've appreciate how much work this is. And if you would like to see the maps again too, we're happy to share those and continue to answer questions. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may just add to your question, or what I think I heard in your question when you asked about what would happen if the allocations are not transferred, you know, is there phasing, is there banking? And you just heard Jill answer, no, we don't have those options right now unless the ordinance is, until the ordinance is amended. So our guess at what would happen is that the 20 that if the council doesn't allocate the Measure D certificates, our assumption is that these 20 would immediately get right back in line on January 1st and resubmit for next year. And then of course, any new ones that are submitted for next year. And so what happens would just be a backlog would start to develop, and we would be in a similar position, you know, next year at this time. And it would start, the number that weren't being allocated would just start to build.
Got it. Thank
And
you.
one last point quickly, these are for the base downtown allocations. We still would have the bonus downtown allocations available. There still would be those 22 downtown bonus allocations available for the remainder of the year.
And Brittany, did you point out which 4 specifically are the affordable ones?
Yes, it's these first two here.
First two.
720 Monte Vista and 704 Monte Vista.
Okay. Councilmember Reddick?
Yeah, I think you should support the transfer tonight. You know, there would be, it will create a backlog if we don't. Most of them are, in, you know, maybe not the official town center according to Measure D, but they're in the town center. They're, you know, they're east of Main Street, excuse me, east of Highway 1. And in fact, the ones that are outside the town center are actually in Arleta Park and Alsace-Lorraine, with the exception of 2, which, you know, if you look east-west, is still concentrated in sort of the general town center, right? You're not going way up Highway 1 to one of the subdivisions. These are all sort of collected geographic in the geographic center of town, including the one at Kelly Avenue. I mean, you know, so yes, from a purity standpoint, no transfers, I think would make us all feel good. But the fact of the matter is, you know, ADUs are still create more affordable opportunities. It allows potentially, you know, an elderly person to move in with family members as opposed to expensive board and care or assisted living. So it does solve some of the problem. Might not solve all of the problem that you're most interested in, but it'll solve some of the problems. So for me, that makes it worth supporting. So I would encourage my fellow council members to defer to, you know, hold that special session about the Measure D ordinance and make what changes, you know, seem reasonable and will advance, you know, council priorities.
Councilmember Reddick, Councilmember Robert.
Can you put that map up again, please? That doesn't look to me like any of these applications are what I would support as being part of what is the downtown area or the central or whatever you want to call it. They're away from it. And that's my point as to why we should not allow the transfer from the area that we do care about, which is the downtown area, town center. I hear different definitions, but these blue dots are not where I think we should encourage new development. We should encourage new development in the area that really is the town center. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Councilmember Arbeck. Councilmember Jimenez.
At least 8 years, it's been a priority to the city of Half Moon Bay, to build low-income housing. It's been at least 8 years. I'm still not interested. If they have to reapply again in January, it's gonna be my same position, next year. I strongly want to support, the building of housing for a community. So I'm not supporting these allocations. Maybe the ones, that are doing the low-income housing, but we know that ADUs are not necessarily housing or affordable housing for a community. We already talked about that. A lot of the ADUs are, market rate housing. That is not, low income housing. So if they have to apply again in January, they have to apply again. My position will not change until we figure out what to do about housing, for our community, something that we really need.
Councilmember Jimenez. My feelings are this. I absolutely have no idea what granting these ADU transfers have anything to do with pursuing affordable housing. If we have some land for affordable housing and we have a developer to do those affordable housing, 30 units or whatever on land because we've got that, I don't see how granting these permits keeps us from pursuing the building of any of that affordable housing. So maybe I just don't get it, but I don't understand what one has to do with the other. And there is a lot, I think ADUs, for the reasons stated by Councilmember Ruddick, you're right. They are not necessarily low income housing. It might be market rate, but it's not like we're investing. Those transfers simply disappear because we can't even bank them yet. So if we could bank them, and you were making the argument, well, wait a minute, I want to bank those to make sure if we can build 30 units, we can use those. That makes sense to me. Why you wouldn't want to just let them being used for these current uses, but we can't bank them now. So I just don't see any loss in allowing these transfers. I don't see what the cost is. I don't see what the cost is to pursuing our affordable housing. So if any council members could explain to me a little clearly, I could have it all wrong, I'm all ears. So thank you, Councilmember Ruddick.
I'd like to move that we adopt a resolution approving a transfer of 20 downtown base measure D allocations, comprising all downtown base allocations remaining as of September 2021 to be used for new dwelling units proposed outside of the downtown area, prioritized according to affordability and readiness, and provide input on potential measure D ordinance updates. Actually, it's the last part about the updates.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Can we have a vote?
Councilmember Rohrbach,
No.
Councilmember Penrose,
No.
Councilmember Jimenez,
No.
Vice Mayor Reddick,
Yes.
Mayor Brownstone,
Yes.
motion fails.
Okay, now, if I can still get some clarification from any council members here. Councilmember Rohrbach, Jimenez, explain to me your reasoning how such transfers would detract from our ability to pursue affordable housing.
That's not my point, okay? If we believe in the reason that Measure D was passed in the first place as a population control, then the allocations outside the downtown were set to be the 0.5% there, and that should continue to be the case. I'm not claiming that voting no on the transfers is going to help affordable housing. I wish it was, but I understand it's not. That's not why I voted no. I voted no because I think we should prioritize the downtown area, all the new housing that we can get that I hope will be affordable should go down there. So that was my reasoning. I'm a proponent of the philosophy about what Measure D was about, and Measure D was that the area outside the downtown should have the allocation that it currently has and no more. So that's where I'm coming from.
Councilmember Rudder, you still have your hand up, or you're on mute if you do? No. Okay, Councilmember Jimenez.
Band-aids, talking about what the city wants to do about affordable housing, low-income housing in our community. Approving these allocations outside, even outside of downtown area for ADUs is still not serving, the need for housing. I see it as a Band-Aid, something that we could actually do. But the 1% growth, why don't we just hold it? Hold it to we can actually have something that we can offer our community that when it comes to affordable housing. How, as I understand, the water connections might not affect, the future Half Moon Bay, water sources, but it could. We don't know. We don't know what the future has for us. So, being able allocating more water connections outside that will not be for low-income housing, I'm not interested. Like I said, the city of Half Moon Bay, we know it's out of compliance. Doing these allocations is going to keep us there, out of compliance, for affordable low-income housing, for our community. It might not change, it might not affect it, but the way I see it, it does. The longer we hold back on building, housing for our community, the worse it's gonna get. More people are losing their homes, more people are being evicted, and building, giving these allocations, it's just gonna do something else to our community. It's gonna change the demographics of our community. I understand what, Vice Mayor Reddick said, maybe these new ADUs will be for an elder parent. It could be. But, what is the possibility on that? The extreme low income to go into those ADUs. Come on, we have families. We have 3 families sharing a 2-bedroom apartment. How bad is that? So I'm not interested, in the allocations, to go anywhere else. If we don't build, if we lose them, we don't bank them, we lose them, I'm okay with that. Like I said, if it's not for low income, extremely low income, very low income housing, I'm not interested.
Got it. Thank you. I still think those are 2 completely separate issues, but we can agree to kindly disagree with each other. So I would like to make a motion that we transfer those 4 low-income ADUs out of the 20. So not transferring 16, but those 4 ADUs that have been designated as very low income, which will have deed restrictions to that, effect on Monte Vista Lane. And pull
Low,
those
I believe
four-
they're categorized as low, not.
Oh,
very
low, sorry, low income, right, okay. Low income on Monte Vista Lane, and let those move forward.
I can second that.
And through the mayor to
Point
clarify.
of
Wait,
order.
I'm sorry, wait, hang on, sorry, did I?
No, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, it is the two single family and ADUs
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
accommodations at the top of the page there.
Yeah, it's not just ADUs, it's a single family.
Yeah, I got that.
plus. Okay,
Correct. All
Right, no, I
four
got it.
proposed
I
for
got it.
low
I
income.
got it. No, I understand that. Thank you. I appreciate it. So there's a second. Can we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Rebek,
no,
Councilmember Penrose,
Yes.
Councilmember Jimenez,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reddit,
Yes,
Mayor Brownstone,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. All right. Is there any other instruction we need? for
Yes,
staff on
Mr.
this?
Mayor, I
Yes.
would like some clarification on the next step. So we heard from Councilmember Ruddick that it's her preference to have another study session on the possible changes that Ms. Ekus went over to improve the Measure D ordinance prior to actually bringing the ordinance forward for a first reading. So we can certainly do that. Just looking at scheduling, we can schedule that soon. I don't think Jill and Brittany will have additional information beyond what they presented today. They will look at the one suggestion that Councilmember Ruddick made, which was to look at adding other efficiencies, electrical efficiencies, sustainability type efficiencies as an important criteria. Maybe add that in addition to water conservation. So they will add that. I don't think they'll have additional information really beyond what they had today. So I would encourage council members to get questions to us before the study session or talk to Jill and Brittany one-on-one so that we're ready when we get to the study session to move an ordinance forward for your consideration. And happy to schedule that. We can make a date certain today, or you can just leave it to us to put it on the next available slot that's available on a regular council agenda.
well, you might actually think about a joint planning commission, city council, work session and just sort through the issues. Each of those has issues. I already have, predispositions on some, like no incremental, Measure D allocations for ADUs to start. But, we need to brainstorm what the consequences are, especially as relates to the ordinance. Maybe you just want to change, the map. That would probably have to go to the voters. But, I just don't want it attached to an item where it's not clear to the public what's being discussed. I want it to be separate. I don't want a draft ordinance to come forward until we sort through them. And if it would speed things along by having a joint meeting with the planning commission, so be it. I think they'd be interested in, having that information shared amongst, all of us. So just want to throw that out.
I'd like to hear
And I also-
Jill what she thinks of the timeline.
Thank you. There a couple of folks were speaking. I think you were asking me about the timeline. I just want to make sure that was the question.
Yes, I wanted to know how much time you think it would take you to prepare answers to the suggestions that you have made in the staff report.
Okay. Well, first, I would like to note that this is such a rich topic that I'd be concerned about overlapping it with your forthcoming study session on affordable housing. Our intent for that session is to focus on sites that will be in depth. I can't imagine that we could get through it in faster than a couple hours. You know how much community interest there is in that. So we just want to offer that these things really need to be separated, even though they have a relationship. I like the idea of a joint session. Need to I'm looking at my whiteboard. I need to figure out how that works with your commission. And we could be ready pretty quickly to either align this with a regularly scheduled council meeting, such as your second October meeting. As you had a study session tonight that started at 5, maybe that's a nice way to do it. So that we're not jamming into the depth of your meeting. So give us a chance to take a look at that. I'll talk to the city manager, and Brittany and I also need to really dig into our workload. We have a lot prepared though here for you, and it seems to me at this point that you might enjoy having us demonstrate some corner cases and things like that, so that it feels a little more hands-on and comfortable. And we also need to clarify that we really weren't proposing to amend the ballot measure in what we were bringing forward. And so your discussion may have crossed the line for that, and that's okay. But that expands beyond some of the work that we had thought about doing. So we would like to see you certainly within the next month or two on this.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Councilmember Penrose, Councilmember Arbeck.
I just want to reiterate what Deborah Penrose said. I really seriously support the banking of Measure D certificates by the city as a way to encourage development, affordable housing development. So I really think that is a wonderful idea. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. Shame on us if we create another situation where we have unused numbers of transfers that we cannot bank. So what we might need to do to change the ordinance, if we can at least start having staff explore that, because I realize that might be very different steps, and totally agree that we should keep our housing conversation, affordable housing conversation, separate from this, because there's different, don't want to overwhelm and confuse the 2 issues, so keep them distinct is an excellent suggestion. Does staff have enough in direction? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to item 3B, Public Safety Work Plan Update. I believe we're going to receive a staff recommendation. Well, no, we're going to receive the updates. We don't have to make any decisions, I presume. It's just receiving a staff report.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Matthew Chittister, your Deputy City Manager. Happy to be before you tonight to provide an update on all the work we're doing around the Public Safety Work Plan. Bob and I will be teaming up on this presentation. There are certain areas that I'm focused on and certain areas that he's focused on, just given the amount of work that's required on this subject. Additionally, we reported this to the Public Safety Subcommittee last Wednesday night. The staff report includes everything that was shared with them on Wednesday night, as well as additional modifications based on their feedback and input. And so based on that, and our report last Wednesday night took a full hour. I'm pretty sure you all don't want a full hour of me talking tonight. So I'm going to keep my comments fairly brief. I'm just going to hit the high points of the report, and I think Bob will do the same. There are a couple areas that we'll focus in on and provide some additional detail. And then, of course, any questions you have or comments, we're happy to go into more detail on specific items, but just keeping in mind the late hour. So with that, I'll begin the report. As you all know, and as many of those watching know, this is an item, a topic that the city's been really engaged in over the last year and a half, going back to early last summer in response to both the George Floyd incident and other incidents around the country, and the 2 killings on the coast side of individuals at the hands of law enforcement. Your council held several meetings and provided direction that we needed to do research and community outreach and develop some recommendations around law enforcement and public safety for Half Moon Bay. And as you know, back in July of this year, the council adopted or approved, I'm sorry, going back even to June of this year, or May of this year, I apologize, the council approved and adopted the Uniro Serrano Presente program, which was given to them by the Latino Advisory Council as a way to start to build connections between law enforcement and the community, build trust, and also start to address some of the issues, especially around mental health. And so that was approved back in May, and staff immediately began implementation. In July of this year, your council approved a public safety work plan for staff for fiscal year 2021-22, which includes 8 deliverables. And tonight's presentation is an update on those 8 deliverables. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And everybody see that? Okay, the first deliverable under the recommendations comes under community policing, and it is to continue the implementation of the Uniro Serrano Presente program. This includes 3 major components: meet your deputies, the resource line, and a commitment to mental health. Additional detail under the resource line was to provide at least quarterly reports to the council of data and trends tracked from the resource line. The program also includes a 4th component related to the 8 Can't Wait initiative around use of force. And in meeting with San Mateo County Sheriff believes that they have adopted 6 of those recommendations and meets the other 2 under certain caveats. In discussions with the Latino Advisory Council on that issue, they intended to go back and do additional research and come to the city with additional questions or recommendations around 8 Can't Wait. And as we receive that, we'll bring that forward. So for the 3 items that the city is currently adopting and moving forward, the Meet the Deputies program is intended to connect community members with law enforcement to create meaningful relationships and important connections in positive ways proactively, so that at the time that the community and law enforcement have to meet in more stressful situations, there is an understanding of who each other is as people and the humanity on both sides of the issue, and hopefully to have those relationships influence those interactions. The program was kicked off on June 9th of this year with a Zoom meeting due to concerns around COVID. It was a pretty formal meeting. It was pretty well attended, although it didn't necessarily hit all of the demographics that we were hoping to reach here in the city. And it didn't really accomplish the intent of the program. And so following that meeting, a lot of work was done between Captain Saul Lopez from the Sheriff's Office and Councilmember Jimenez. They developed a different, more informal, but better connecting format. They dubbed it Tacos with Cops, and it was held on August 20th at the Main Street Park Apartments. And many more community members attended, estimated at 40 to 50. There was food, games, and a lot more genuine connection and interaction between the deputies and the community. And so that's the format we plan to use going forward. We're planning our next event to be held in November or December at a park or another outdoor location within the city, keeping in mind the concerns around COVID. And we hope to do more of those next year. The resource line, which we call the Law Enforcement Feedback Program, includes both a phone number and a web form where people can provide anonymous feedback about their interactions or their observed interactions with law enforcement. Since its launch in July of this year, we've received 5 submissions, and those submissions are summarized on our website with a report that's updated every week. The summaries there are consistent with the state penal code. we are unable to share all the information that I think the community and the council had hoped we would be able to share. But we believe that this is still going to be an effective tool to gather information, understand what's going on in the community, and provide feedback and work with the sheriff's office. Of course, we're concerned that we've only received 5 pieces of feedback in 2 months. And so we're working very closely with the community on additional outreach tools. Clearly, our outreach tools only reached a certain segment of the population. And so working with community partners, we've developed a resource card. It's a business card sized document that is double-sided, and it'll be available to all of our nonprofit partners to hand out at events, to provide to people seeking a way to provide feedback, and to have available at their facilities. Those will be distributed hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We're also developing a frequently asked questions flyer with details about the use of the information and anonymity to help alleviate concerns about utilizing the feedback line, as well as a paper form so that those that are unable to use a phone or a computer to provide feedback will have an analog approach to providing feedback. So we'll be working closely with our nonprofit partners. We believe grassroots outreach is the key right now to get this out to everybody. And then we'll continue to work on this, and hopefully it becomes fruitful in the future. And then in relation to mental health services, your city council dedicated $75,000 towards enhanced mental health services in the budget this year, beyond the funding we already provide under the CSFA grant program. We believe that money would be best used towards helping to fund the community responder pilot program, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, as well as supporting mental health first responder training for staff, nonprofits, and other community members. Both of these were recommendations that came out of the mental health focus groups that we convened earlier this year with the community. The second item under community policing is somewhat tied to the first item, and that's to promote events and opportunities for deputies to meet community members and business operators where they work and live. The Meet the Deputies program is an important component of this and something we'll continue. In August, we continued our tradition of hosting and promoting the National Night Out program, which is the first Thursday of every year. It's a national program to encourage communities to hold block parties and bring law enforcement out. It's something your council has been very supportive of over the years. Last year was the only year we didn't do it in the last 4 or 5 years. And we typically provide funding to help the block parties move forward, and a lot of law enforcement engagement and support. The sheriff's office is a big supporter of this as well. This year on August 3rd, we had 17 parties and a large showing of law enforcement, and it was a really great event connecting the community with law enforcement. The next one will be next August, August 2nd of 2022, so start planning your parties. We also believe that scheduled walks with law enforcement, city officials, and community members to really meet with individuals and community members where they are is going to be an important tool to connect folks as well. Councilmember Jimenez has already done some of these walks with our sheriff's captain and deputies, and we'd like to develop a more formalized program to make sure these happen on a regular basis. And then the last item under this I'll mention is, we really rely on some of our larger community events to bring out law enforcement support and connect with the community. As we know, some of those events are not going to move forward this year, but there are many really important events that we're looking forward to in 2022. And we're committed to ensuring that the planning of those events includes real focused effort to have law enforcement and community connect in really positive ways. And again, we think all of this will help develop more trusting relationships between law enforcement and the community. Excuse me. With that, I'll kick it over to Bob for the next two.
Thank you, Matthew. If you can go back one slide, you skipped ahead one slide already. Back one, up, back one. Perfect. I'll take the next two of our deliverables. This one, as council will recall, was a direction to staff to do a survey of the community to see how the public feels about public safety in the community. This was discussed at several council meetings. during the time that we were discussing the Jimenez-Rarbeck paper and the question of how does the community feel about policing, and do they all feel the same, and what, if anything, should we do about it? And so it was during those discussions that this idea came up that we should do it the best of our ability, try to find out how the community feels instead of speculating about how we think they feel. And so at the Public Safety Subcommittee, this one was reiterated. I would say that we received kind of two directions on it. One was to move faster. We haven't really started the survey work yet. We presented to the subcommittee that we had talked to 3 or 4 firms. We were getting ready to put an RFP out, and we would move to hire a firm by the end of the year. And the direction was to speed things up. And then the second direction, I would say, was a reiteration of the second sentence of this deliverable. I think it was Councilmember Ruddick who said, we really need to make it clear to the consultant once we hire them, what question are we asking, or what series of questions are we asking? And it was reiterated how important that is. And the second sentence here, I'll just read: pay particular attention to the mitigation of and correction of bias, and ensuring that underrepresented voices are proportionally included. So just an underscore of how important that is for this survey to be meaningful. And so we agree with that. So our commitment to the subcommittee was that we would speed it up. And it's our plan to actually hire the chosen firm prior to November. And the Public Safety Subcommittee also directed us that they'd like to meet every other month. So they will now have a standing meeting every either second or third Wednesday every other month. And so the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for November 10th. And it is our intention to have the firm hired by that meeting so that the person can be at the subcommittee and work with the subcommittee to really get at what we're trying to accomplish this survey and the methodology that they will use. So I think that was important. And when we get to council discussion, of course, the 2 members of the subcommittee can give their views themselves. I certainly don't need to do it for them. Can go to the next slide then, please, Matthew. The 4th deliverable is to request that data that is tracked in compliance with AB 953. Make sure we get that specifically for Half Moon Bay, not just countywide data, but we want obviously data for stops in Half Moon Bay once the county starts to provide that. The comment I will make here is this is certainly a long-term deliverable. This bill was passed in 2015, and it did not envision that this would happen quickly. San Mateo County does not even have to start reporting on statistical data until January 1st of 2022, which is just over a year from now. So it is not a fast-moving one. It's going to take some time for this data to be submitted to the state and then collected and disseminated. So this is long-term, but I did want to just note that the grand jury for San Mateo County is watching this process closely. And in fact, they just came out with a grand jury report on July 27th of this year. This was a countywide report, went to all cities, all local law enforcement agencies. The report is entitled Building Greater Trust Between the Community and Law Enforcement via the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. That's AB 953. The acronym for future reference is RIPA. You'll be hearing more about that, RIPA. So we are bound to respond to that report. And so you will see an item on the council's agenda next meeting, October 5th. We have 90 days to respond. So we will be bringing a response forward to the council. And the one item that we have to respond to primarily, it's not a big deal, but they have a recommendation. I'm going to read from it here. Recommendation 8 says that in the second quarter of 2022, each contracting entity, and they are referring to Half Moon Bay in that statement, each contracting entity should begin requesting RIPA stop data for its jurisdiction separate from the rest of the sheriff's stop data. So the grand jury was completely in line with our thoughts on making sure we got our hands on this data. So we will respond to them that we intend to do that, and you'll see that at your next meeting. That's the only comment I have to make on that one. Like I said, this is a long-term endeavor, and clearly this data, once we do get it and disseminate it and start looking at trends, will be very useful for us in the work that we do here. You can click to the next two, Matthew. You're up.
Thank you, Bob. Deliverable number 5 falls under mental health, and this is a two-part deliverable. The first is to monitor the pilot program being implemented between the 4 largest cities in San Mateo County and County BHRS, and learn from it and determine if it's something as it moves forward that we want to try to implement here. That is called the Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team, CWCRT. This was announced back in January of this year, and it's a joint project between County Behavioral Health and Recovery Services and the cities of Daly City, San Mateo, Redwood City, and South San Francisco. These are the largest cities. They all have their own police departments, and it would pair specially trained officers with mental health clinicians that also have special training to provide what's called a co-response program to mental health related calls. At this time, the contractor for the county, which is Star Vista, is in the process of hiring these clinicians, and we hope to see this move forward soon. The second piece of this is to work with the county and other partners here on the coast to plan a mental health crisis response pilot program that includes broad outreach and engagement with our partner stakeholders and community to make sure this is successful. The official title of this project is the Community Responder Program Pilot. It's something we've been talking about for many, many months, and we're really happy to get specific direction from the council on this, as is the community. Since getting this direction, we've held several meetings with different agencies, public safety and 911 dispatch, the Sheriff's Office, BHRS, county administration, and many of our nonprofit partners. On August 13th of this year, we reconvened the mental health focus group, which was 20+ individuals from different agencies to discuss the program pilot and identify the best structure for this pilot. Ultimately, the direction we got, or the recommendation we received, was to pursue a pilot that resembles the CAHOOTS program, which you received a presentation on back in July. This would pair it'd create a team that would respond to specific types of 911 calls. And of course, that list could grow over time as this concept proves itself. The team would consist of 2 different types of responders. One would be on the medical side. They'd be an EMT, a paramedic, a nurse that could do physical assessments, medical assessments, and stabilize individuals, because often mental health crises are connected to physical ailments and physical illness or injury. The other team member would be a mental health clinician or a social worker. Both would receive extensive specialized training on crisis intervention, de-escalation, conflict resolution, and they would work in partnership with all the different service providers here on the coast and the Sheriff's Office to respond to these calls. And the whole purpose is for calls that are appropriate. We don't send out armed law enforcement. We send out individuals that can go and really help resolve the situation and get people connected to the services that they need. Where we're at in this process is continuing to talk with public safety communications. They're a really, really important partner in this, because the 911 dispatch program, as it stands right now, doesn't really allocate this new set of calls that could go to a different responder. They're committed to working with us. They have not made any promises that they can make it happen now or quickly, but we've received really positive response from them, and we have a good partnership growing with them. The other piece that we're really focused on right now is identifying what role our different local nonprofits are going to play in this process. We kind of see 3 roles. One is kind of our prime collaborator and contractor. It's a nonprofit here on the coast that can hire staff, and execute the program in collaboration with the city, and really make sure that it's staffed and running effectively. The next tier would be other nonprofits that maybe don't have the bandwidth to be that lead agency, but could provide staff. They could contract out a clinician or another staff member to help make this program successful and really keep it coastside centric and address all the different populations that we could be serving with this. And then the third tier would be any of our other service providers that are supportive of this program and want to see it be successful. Our goal, as similar to the previous item on the survey, is to have the primary contractor identified and have them attend the November 10th meeting of the Public Safety Subcommittee, where we can really get into the nitty-gritty of how we're going to execute this and what it's going to cost. And then, of course, we've got to find the funds to make a pilot happen. So really, I can't say how excited we are as a team to be working on this project. It's really meaningful to staff, and only heard positive responses from our community collaborators and the service providers here. There's a lot of energy behind this, and we're really excited to be on the leading edge of this here in San Mateo County. The next item is tied to this somewhat, and that is to pursue grants and other outside funding sources for increased mental health services. So as I described, we have $75,000 available in our current budget to help get this pilot moving forward and to implement other mental health enhancements. We also in this budget have funding for a grant writing consultant who we're identifying right now and hope to have on board soon, that can really be focused on the specific things we're working on. And this would be a top priority, is seeking funding for this mental health pilot that we want to do, for other services that we want to have addressed here on the coast under mental health. And we know that we're in a very unique time where there's a lot of funding available at the national and state level and coming available. And we want to be well positioned to pursue and obtain that funding for all of our projects. Additionally, we're tracking the progress on a couple of assembly bills that I wanted to share with you tonight. The first is Assembly Bill 988. It's officially titled the 988 Crisis Hotline. In 2020, the federal government enacted a law that dedicated 988 as the official number to call when in a mental health crisis. And currently they have funding in the budget to have that number directed to existing suicide hotlines. We have one here in San Mateo County that would qualify for that. And the state wants to see that expand here through this AB 988 to provide funding and direction to counties over the next 6 to 7 years to set up actual 988 call centers like a 911 call center, and response programs like what we're working on with the community responder pilot. So that's really important work, and we're excited to see it coming, but it's the long game here. This is 6 or 7 years probably in the making. And so our community responder pilot, I think, is an important bridge to all of that happening. The second one we're tracking is AB 118. This is titled Department of Social Services Crises Grant Pilot Program. And Senator Josh Becker, our senator, is one of the co-authors. We're in contact with his office, and they're willing to help shepherd us through this process when it comes about. But what it will do is it'll create a grant program that could offer up to, or at least $250,000 a year to jurisdictions who want to do exactly what we're doing, pilot these alternative responses to mental health crises programs. The funding would begin January 1st of 2023 and continue for several years. So we really want to have this pilot up and running and have a proof of concept and pursue these funds, because this could really help us to expand it over the years. And so we'll be working very closely with Senator Becker's office to make sure that we're in a good position and partnering with whoever we need to make ourselves eligible. Additional opportunities we're looking at are, of course, a lot of grants. I've attended several webinars on police reforms and funding for police reforms. Recently one through the Obama Foundation, made some really great connections who are trying to look for federal opportunities and national opportunities for us. Additionally, we've made contact with several philanthropic groups here in the Bay Area The CZI, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, is one that has shown a lot of interest in the coast and is currently considering our pilot program as something that it might be able to help us find funding for. It didn't fit into the criteria of their current community funding, but they are very interested, and we're looking forward to meeting with them more on this. Bob, next item.
Thank you, Matthew. I'll take the last two and I'll make it quick. So the seventh deliverable was to set up a regular working group with the other 4 contract cities. The report that we gave to the subcommittee was that while 2 cities seemed like they might be interested, 2 may not. San Carlos and Millbrae have not shown a lot of interest. So the direction we received from the subcommittee was if we could get a meeting with just the 2 that are interested, Portola Valley and Woodside, let's go for it. So we will try to pursue that. The other comment that was made by the subcommittee was that we might have more luck if contacts were made at a council to council level rather than a city manager to city manager level. So we will continue to work on that to get something set up with those 2 cities. Next slide, Matthew. And then finally, and this is the 8th deliverable, and this is subject to the next item on your agenda, which has to do with our sheriff's contract. And this one, as you recall, if you can go one back, Matthew, is to work with the sheriff to look for ways to make positive modifications to the contract in the areas of training, community policing, and mental health. Noting that we're on the agenda tonight is to look at extending that contract, which currently terminates June 2022. So I'll save any additional comments on that until the next item and turn it back to your council. And Mr. Mayor, if the members of the Public Safety Subcommittee want to go first, that's fine. If there's any questions from the rest of you, we'll take those now.
Before we get into our questions and conversation, why don't we get some public comments, if there are any. I'll open up the public comments session here if there's any comments. See one hand raised.
Maureen Fleming.
Yes, if I could get a clarification, I'm a little bit confused on something similar to Star Vista that the 4 cities are now testing out for themselves. And so did this city council make the decision that they are also going to proceed with this pilot project, or are you waiting to see how the 4 cities have done? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I can take that if you want me to.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Sure. No, to answer the question, the short answer is no, that's not the way we're doing it. We are following what the 4 cities are doing to learn from their program, watch what they do, take any positives from what they do for ourselves, and any lessons they learn, we'll be able to discard those. So while we are watching and trying to learn from what they're doing, no, we're not trying to jump on their bandwagon. We are trying to set up our own program that would work here for the city of Half Moon Bay and do it our way.
I'll also add that part of the reason that we're not participating in that pilot is we weren't invited to, because that is focused on cities that have their own police departments. There's no sheriff's involvement in that program. And so we don't fit that mold. But as Bob said, maybe we could adapt it to our own program in the future if it works out well.
Okay, I don't think there's any more hands raised. So I'll now end public comments session. And we will now have some discussion. Can we go back on the slide deck just for a second? Because I had something I wanted to also just ask here. Go to the mental health slide, which was one of the last ones. Yeah. So, Matthew, when you were describing this, you had a lot of detail, a lot of sheets of paper I saw you reading from, there are a lot of pieces to that. And I couldn't remember it all. I mean, I could go back and watch the video, you know, and take copious notes, but if you don't mind, like maybe making a couple extra slides and sharing all those elements, you know, what it would look like, what are some of the headwinds and the tailwinds, right? Because having the community responder pilot, of all the pieces that we have the most public comment on, involving Serrano, involving our public safety committee meetings, this is the piece that really resonated the most with the community. Like, yeah, we do need a cahoots type program ideally, because that's a proactive program that de-escalates incidents and gives people what they really need in terms of help and assessment. And I think the quicker, it's a lot easier to get grant money if there's some kind of pilot that we could stand up, right? And not only do we have that 75,000 that we've committed, as you recall, we did get a commitment from Supervisor Horsley, an initial commitment that he would be willing to match that with another 75,000. So, you know, the quicker we can make some of that 150,000, you know, work by trying to figure out some pieces and, you know, where there's a timeline. I think if I was a member of the community really interested in this, the more I see that we're, you know, moving forward on this very important element, I think that would be great. I'm not saying that the other pieces aren't important, but this is really one of the more complicated ones, but I think one that would bear the most fruits. And the fact that the cahoots model was recommended. Again, we just have to show something to people to get more excitement, more energy, and potentially more money. And that we can go around to other potential donors to start collecting money for it. And so, yeah, I did just want to clarify that. And if you can maybe, yeah, put together a couple of other slides of some of the detail around that so we can all stay focused and help and, you know, figure some of that out would be terrific. Okay, that's all I have to say. Okay, back to Councilmember Penrose. I'm sorry, you're on mute, Councilmember.
I believe Councilmember Rohrbach was first.
Oh, okay, Councilmember Rohrbach.
Thank you, Deborah. I have a positive and a negative comment about the work plan. The negative comment, and I've made this before, is that I believe the community survey is a waste of time and money. I don't really see anything useful coming out of it. And if you don't believe me, the response line has generated 5 responses in 3 months. People are not interested in reacting to what they perceive as government override. And so, you know, I know I'm preaching to deaf ears and it's not going to make any change, but it just seems to me that it's $25,000 wasted. That's the bad news. The good news is that the community responder pilot is a wonderful idea, and I heartily embrace it. I think we should pursue it, not just from the point of view of grants, but from the point of view of actually implementing it and working with the 911 responders. I think that's a real step in the right direction, and I applaud the city staff, Matthew, Bob, for pursuing that part of the work plan, which I think is really good. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Rohrbach, and I respect your persistence on what you don't like. So good on you. Councilmember Penrose.
Yes, I would have to disagree with Councilmember Rohrbach on his negative point. I feel very strongly that the resource line needs to be there for at least those 5. Hopefully, there will be more people in time who will take advantage of it as they begin to trust the city and trust our sheriffs. I also think that if you don't ask, then you'll never know what people have to say. And if you ask and they don't respond, you're no worse off. So I am thrilled with the progress that our subcommittee has made. And I would like to shout out in particular to Councilmember Jimenez and Councilmember Reddick for the work that they've done, along with the tremendous work that staff has done to get us to this point. I know earlier this summer, it felt like it was never going to happen. Last year with COVID, trying to have these resource meetings with all the members of the community was stressful on staff, difficult for them, and they just worked it and did a great job. So for all of the effort that's gone into it, I am grateful and very pleased with the progress that we've made so far. I think that the commitment to a cahoots type program is great. I think it's been very, very revealing to me the importance of having a medically trained responser in situations where there is a mental health crisis. So I'm pleased with that part. I also would like to say that unlike the programs in the 4 pilot cities, where they have been having difficulty getting mental health providers to work the programs, they've been in the works for months, and Star Vista is just now beginning to work with them to get mental health providers. We have mental health providers here on the coast who are ready, willing to go into training, specialty training, to accomplish the goals that we've got. So I think we're in very good shape, and we've got nonprofits that are more than able to take over running of the program. So I'm excited and thrilled, and thank you, Councilmember Jimenez and Reddick and Matthew and everybody else on staff who's been involved.
Councilmember Penrose. Councilmember Jimenez.
I just want to say, thank you to Matthew and Bob and staff for all the great work. I'm very pleased with what has been happening, with the actions you've been taking. So I just want to say publicly, I'm very grateful for all your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jimenez. Okay, so we've received the report. Is there any other action that we need to take? I think that's it. Again, thank you. We're moving forward. And yeah, let's keep it up. I think you've got a sense of what we're most excited about here as council members and which pieces. So great work. And I agree with Councilmember Penrose. We are in a unique situation. We do have resources here, which really makes us unique from over the hill where they're scarce. So that is a great tailwind that we should hopefully be able to take advantage of. Thank you. Okay, last item on the agenda. Item 3C is an agreement for law enforcement services with San Mateo County Sheriff's Office with an option to extend. I believe we have a staff report first that we'll receive.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, community members. Our recommendation tonight, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but each of you have a very short 3-page staff report that you can refer to. Our recommendation tonight is that the council does authorize the city manager to send a letter to the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office exercising our third option with our agreement for law enforcement services. And that would be a 3-year option that would extend the services provided by the Sheriff's Office through June 30th, 2025. The Sheriff's contract was initiated on June 7th, 2011. So just over 10 years ago, we started this partnership with the County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services. The initial agreement was a 5-year agreement, and it included 3 3-year options. So the first option at the end of the first 5-year term, the first 3-year option was exercised for services through 2016. The second option was exercise for a second 3-year term through June, starting in June 2019. And now we're before your council to exercise the third option, as I said, that would take us through 2025. This must be done in writing, and it must be done by each party by September 30th, which is why we're here tonight on September 21st. At the Public Safety Subcommittee, this item was discussed very briefly, but we did receive direction from the subcommittee to bring options forward. So even though staff's recommendation is to just move ahead and exercise the option in accordance with the agreement, the subcommittee did ask for a couple of options, and we have included 3 options in the staff report, and I'll go through them now. So option 1 in the staff report is staff's recommendation, and that is to simply go ahead with the language that's in the agreement and exercise a 3-year option that would carry us through June 30th, 2025. Option number 2 is kind of a minimal maximal option, if you will. So this option would be, we would send a letter to the sheriff, but we would actually request a modification to the agreement. So they would have to agree with our request. And that modification is that instead of exercising the 3-year option, we would simply eliminate any kind of a term. And we would just use the termination clause as either party's way to get out of the contract. So what this does on the one hand is it makes the contract effectively a 1 to 2 year contract in perpetuity, but it also makes it a long-term contract because the language would be changed that we don't have to take any action for the contract to keep rolling over year to year. It would only require action or a letter from either party to terminate the contract, not to extend the contract. So on the one hand, it relies on the termination clause and makes it a shorter term contract. On the other hand, it makes it a longer term contract in that it'll just keep going until either party says, hey, it's time to stop. So on that option, I just wanted to read the termination clause that's in the contract. It is in the staff report, section 5.1. Either party may terminate this agreement with or without cause by written notice sent at least 12 months prior to the termination. And then the termination will be effective the first day of July, at least 12 months following the written notice. And that's why I make the statement that our termination clause varies. It's anywhere between 1 year and 2 years, depending on when notice is made. So that's an important point that I can certainly take questions on. And then the third option that we provide is to send a letter to the sheriff requesting a 2-year extension instead of a 3-year extension. And I make a couple additional points in the staff report. Comments have been made and in the public safety work plan that we should try to negotiate positive changes to the contract. I make a point that section 2.1 allows the city to make requests at any time. So the term of the contract has no bearing on the two parties getting together and collectively agreeing on changes and positive changes in the city's mind. Obviously, it's a 2-party agreement, so both sides have to agree, but that can be done at any time, regardless of what term is on the contract. So I just wanted to point out section 2.1 exists under any scenario. And then at the end of the staff report, I simply list what I feel is the advantage of each of the 3 options. Again, our recommendation is option number 1. And with that, I'll turn it over back to your council for any questions.
Any clarification questions? Okay, open up for public comment. Any comments from the public? I see no hands raised. Is that correct, Jessica?
No speakers, Mayor.
Now close public comment. We'll now open up for council discussion. Oh, well, I'd like to make a comment. No one else.
No,
Councilmember Rarbeck has his hand raised.
Oh, sorry, you know, Harry, you're in the upper left there, and my eyes are looking elsewhere for a minute. Sorry about that.
No
Councilmember Rarbeck.
Thanks. I support option 2 because it gives us the flexibility to say that we really need to be able to negotiate in the future a better contract. I'm sure you all are aware of the Jimenez-Rohrbeck report and the suggestions that we have made to improve public safety that have not been incorporated in the current contract. Sheriff Bolanos has made it very clear that he's not open to any of those suggestions that would really affect public safety policy. It might be in the future that we would be in a better position to negotiate with either Sheriff Bolanos or his successor. And I think by saying that we are not committed to a particular term, but that we would like to keep open our options, I think that makes the most sense in the current situation. So that's, I would support option 2.
Councilmember Rarbeck, Councilmember Penrose.
Yeah, this is a clarifying question, I think. I'm still a little bit confused. With option 2, should we go with option 2 and decide in a month's time from now that we want to terminate our current agreement because we want something added and the sheriff is refusing, for instance? It would take still at that point between 1 to 2 years for the agreement to be finished?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Penrose. So I'll just do it by example. That's the easiest way for me to understand it. So hopefully this helps. So let's just assume hypothetically, perfectly hypothetically, that we elected to terminate the contract and we sent that letter on November 1st of this year. That would then be effective 20 months later. So 8 months to finish the year, November, December, all the way through June 30th, plus 1 more year. So in that scenario, if we sent that letter November 1st of this year, then the earliest it would be, the termination would be effective June 30th, 2023.
Okay, thank you. You did clarify it for me. And in that instance, I am in favor of option 3 with a 2-year contract. I would rather know that 2 years from now we're terminated rather than have it a guess whether it's going to be 20 months or 26 months possibly.
24 would be the latest.
Or 24. I'm happy with the 2-year agreement. It also gives the sheriff's office a vote of confidence that we believe that they will incorporate some of our suggestions. I don't know that the current sheriff is going to be in office a year from now. So we'll have a new sheriff and we'll have to be dealing with them. But if we ahead of time say, we're hoping we can work with you, then maybe that'll help. I don't know. I don't see the advantage of doing the option number 2.
So I'll ask a question. So if we went with option 2, no, I'm sorry, you were talking about option 3, right? Councilmember Penrose, just now?
The option I'm talking about is a 2-year agreement.
Right, which is
2-year contract.
Which was option
3.
Yeah, that's
3.
what I meant, option 3. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry if I misspoke.
No, it's okay. No, I just wanted to talk about the same way. So if we did that, we still have the option of terminating after a year in any of these options, correct?
You had, yeah, that's why I put the termination clause in there, to make the point that the termination clause exists right now, unless we change it, unless the sheriff agrees, regardless of what our term could be 5 years, 10 years,
No, I got
2
it.
years. But as an example, here's why I make the point. Let's assume we actually asked for a 1-year contract. That would then negatively impact the termination clause, right? Because a 1-year contract would be a 1-year contract.
Right,
And the termination clause allows you potentially a longer period of time. So
12 months at a
you
time,
actually lose the termination clause in a 1-year contract. That's I just wanted to
No,
make
I got it. So Councilmember Penrose, now that we clarified that, I'm more inclined to go with option 1 because I like being that we can terminate at any time. The more years we can negotiate a price for, similar to what we've done in some other, instances where we get, a long-term contract, the better we can really nail down a fixed price, which really helps with budgeting, because we could terminate it at any time. So it doesn't matter who's elected. We will have a 3-year contract that there's a termination clause for any time they want. So I like that idea of having a 3-year term of contractual stability, no matter how much other costs might go up, because that's a fairly expensive contract. So again, unless I'm missing something, I see an advantage to negotiating a 3-year contract. So anyway, sorry, Councilmember Rudder.
Yes, I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I think if you can lock down your costs, keep them stable over a longer period, it's beneficial. And the other reason I support option 1 is, we're talking about the possibility of terminating with the backstop being our own police force or contracting with somebody else's police force. I don't see that as an option at all. I would rather, have stable long-term costs and work with the sheriff's office to negotiate, terms that are favorable. I'm not interested in going back to having our own police department or contracting with somebody else's police department. We get a great deal now, and we get a lot of extra services, a lot of extra programs. So this idea that we're gonna, if we don't get our way, we're gonna terminate, I just see that as, I don't understand that. That's not good business as far as I'm concerned. And I don't like the plan B. So I'm supporting option 1.
Councilmember Rudder. No more comments here. Can we get, Councilmember Menez. All right. Please.
Thank you. The termination, I don't think will come in as a, we're not getting what we want, what we need in our community. But actually, that's what we've been talking about. I think the cost, we know the cost of having our own department is expensive. Contracting with the sheriffs, we saving, a few dollars. But what I'm interested on is about being able to work with any department, any law enforcement department. Could be the sheriff's department, could be Pacifica, could be our own police department. Someone that will actually address our community, the needs of our community. To the term of the contract, we have the termination clause, so that we can terminate anytime. But I'm interested, hoping for a change, when the election comes around. It could be either one of the candidates who better fit for our community, for the needs of our community. we already know where our current, sheriff stands. He's been very, very clear where he stands. So I'm looking forward to working with the sheriff's department. If they're going to be able to provide the support and work with our city to better serve our community. So, if it's not the sheriff's department, but we find, let's see, Pacifica, might have more things in common with us, in Half Moon Bay, who has some of the same interests. I mean, I don't know, it could be. We haven't talked, I don't think we have talked about any contract with them, how they will be able to, to provide some of the services that we better need, in our community. So I'm not thinking about terminating, it's not about terminating the contract. It's about actually working, with any providers. And that will do, I understand, Councilman Redback about, we have the possibility to terminate, in a year, 20 months. If we do it and, if we know by December, November that we're not interested in the contract, we can send a letter and be out, in less than 2 years. So, but, I also see, Councilman Penrose, where we have that we want to tell our sheriff's department that we are very interested in working with them. It's let's find a common ground. What services that we are requesting, can you provide for our community? How can we collaborate better, to have our community feel safe? One of the things that actually Captain Lopez and I talked about actually creating one more position, from the sheriff's department, a liaison person, somebody who's going to be more involved with their community, somebody that can report to the sheriff's department, somebody that we can reach out to. One of the conversations with Captain Lopez was about, having the deputies more involved in the community, attending, visiting our schools, walking downtown, having the presence, in our community. And he explained to me that it's not that easy. That's where the other program, the pilot program that we've been talking about, the Bob and Matthew have done, great on it. It's going to free some time from our sheriff's department, to be present somewhere else. Not every call requires an armed officer. So we have to understand that as well. So I'm okay with any of the options. 1, 2, 3, any of the options work for me. So, but I'll go with option number 2. I want to see the possibility of we want to work with our sheriff's department, but we also want to have the possibility to terminate in less than 2 years if we are, find a better contract.
So Councilmember Mez, I just really want to clarify this because I guess I'm confused here. To me, option 1 feels like just a win because we can terminate anytime. We don't need option 2 in order to terminate. Now, I'd like to separate it from elections, frankly, because I just think a 3-year contract is better to negotiate and get better terms. And yes, this is all about how we work with the police department, sheriff's department. But let's just go hypothetically, since you brought up elections. Let's say the elections go in a way that you like, which would be in 2022, correct? Yeah. So let's say the election goes the way you like. well, cool, we already got a contract in place for years, we don't have to renegotiate anything. It's there, we have a nice term, it's expected, and someone you feel you can work better with. Let's say the election doesn't go that way, and you feel that there's not enough cooperation, then there's an option to terminate. So I'm a little confused as to how that's not, option one isn't beneficial to us in the sense that either way how the election goes, we have an existing 3-year contract with, a set amount of money that's we can rely upon, for that 3rd year, one way or the other. Is my question clear of what I'm trying to understand from you, how you see, and if you see it differently, great, I just been trying to understand what the difference is. Or how that's not to our, advantage in any way, why that's, it seems like a real benefit to us versus losing anything in that process. If we're going with that election scenario that you were, talking about there.
I don't think we're losing anything, going for option number 2. I mean, it would just, the contract will continue to renew, unless one of us decides to terminate.
The contract doesn't renew at the same terms necessarily, right? Bob, can you interject that?
Sure, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Jimenez. The contract would keep rolling over indefinitely until either party terminates, or again, at any time, one party can go to the other and say, I'd like to change this section of the contract. Let's negotiate. Or I'd like to add a position, as Councilmember Jimenez suggested. That can happen at any time under any of the options.
But not under option 1, where you have a 3-year fixed term for how much the contract is altogether, right? For 3 years. No one's coming back and saying, you need to pay us a lot more for for each year. Is that correct?
There's also a section in the contract right now that has it amended based on cost of living, and that language would continue in any of the options as well.
Right, but other than a cost of living index, the COLA. But that's different. Councilmember Jimenez, I think that's different from option 2, where everything doesn't just roll over. Anyone, sheriffs can say, no, we want more than the COLA. We need to charge, a good deal more. As opposed to option 1, where it's set for all 3 years other than the COLA. Is that correct? And I'm just looking at a budgeting issue here and how much money we're spending in each option. Is there a difference?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I can give you my opinion and the reason that I felt option 1 was the best if the council wants it, but I won't if the council does not want it. But I can give you my thoughts on your question if you want it.
Yeah, I'm curious.
I think it's more psychological. So I think a 3-year contract, I mean, I'm the one who has to go negotiate with the sheriff, and I've negotiated a lot of contracts, and negotiation is all about relationships, psychology, and leverage. And the contract, we are in a contract that had a 3-year option. And by taking the simple approach and exercising the option and doing what we said we were going to do, that, in my opinion, puts me in the best position to negotiate with the other side, because it's simple for them. It's what we agreed to, and it just puts me in a position, I think, that we were our word. So that's the psychology of the 3-year option to me over the other 2.
If I could chime in, it's more than a budgeting issue. That's what seems to be amiss here in this discussion. I vehemently object to many of the terms of the existing contract. And I would like them changed. And I think the only way they're going to be changed is if there's a change in the sheriff's position, and then we can renegotiate. So that's where I'm coming from. I really think we need more than just continuing the existing budget and with just a COLA. There's a lot more to the contract that needs to be changed, in my opinion, if we really care about public safety. And I think by saying to the sheriff that we're going to have the flexibility of continuing the existing contract, but if we can renegotiate it, if it's in our to our advantage, I think that makes the most sense given the current situation.
Okay. I'm actually ready to make a motion. I move to go with option 3, which is basically a 2-year contract, which I think is what Councilmember Penrose was suggesting, which will take us basically into, a little bit past that election period. But
I'll second.
And we'll have those 2 years nailed down. Could we have a roll call on that?
Councilmember Rohrbach,
No.
Councilmember Jimenez,
Give me a second.
Councilmember Penrose,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reddick,
No.
Councilmember Jimenez,
I'll go for number 3. Yes, on 3.
No, we're only talking about.
Yeah, he's
we
talking
are
about 3.
3.
You
Yeah,
understand?
right.
Yeah.
Mayor Brownstone,
Yes.
motion carries.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Any commission or committee updates?
Bob, if I could make a quick update, and we'll have more details in e-news later this week. But I did just want to notify you that next Wednesday evening from 6 to 8 p.m., we're going to be holding a joint session of the Bike Ped Advisory Committee and the Recreation Commission. And the purpose of it will be to talk about commonalities between the groups and common projects. Talk about the coastal trail quite a bit, which has been a subject that the Rec Commission has been interested in discussing more. And we're excited to have those discussions and run some of the potential projects and things that we're working on by both groups. So hopefully folks will be interested and attend, and we'll provide more details of the agenda in e-news on Thursday evening.
Okay. Any other city council reports or items? Councilmember Jimenez.
It's not a report. I would like to share with you something disturbing that I saw today about what's happening at the southern, the south border. I saw 2 images of an immigration officer, ICE officer, on a horse, whipping immigrants. It was a very disturbing image. As you know, there is a group of Asian, immigrants coming into the United States. And it was just very disturbing to see that. And what it was also disturbing, I could see a smile on that officer as he was whipping, a group of immigrants. So I don't know if you remember when we presented that report part of the history about policing our community came about. Police used to go after slaves. And that image got me thinking about that. Disturbing. Something that happened over 100 years ago is still happening today. So I just wanted to share that with you, that image, those two images, very disturbing. And this was a nice officer.
Appreciate you sharing that one, Pete. Thank you. Okay. That note, more work to do. Thank you, everybody. Good work. Had some complicated issues, so thanks for sticking with us. Thank you to the public for sticking with us tonight, and thank you for staff so much for doing all the great work and supporting all these initiatives, even though sometimes we don't all agree on everything. So thanks a lot. All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.